Have you ever wondered why gun violence in today's gangs is escalating at an alarming rate? It's a question that's been troubling society for years, echoing in the minds of those who seek to understand this disturbing trend. In recent times, the number of gun-related incidents within gangs has skyrocketed, painting a grim picture of the modern gang landscape. To truly grasp the severity of this issue, we must delve into the past. To understand this, we need to take a look back at the history of gang violence. Gun violence in gangs didn't start yesterday. It has a long and complex history. To fully grasp the issue, we need to travel back in time to the early days of gang formation. When gangs initially formed, their purpose was often rooted in protection and community. They served as a shield against outside threats, a response to social and economic marginalization. Violence, while present, was not the defining characteristic. The use of weapons during this period was minimal. A gang's strength was measured by its unity, not by the number of firearms it possessed. Members used their fists and occasionally rudimentary weapons like knives or bats. Guns were rare, and their use was even rarer. Most conflicts were resolved through physical brawls or verbal confrontations. Shootings were few and far between. During these early years, gang activity was more about brotherhood and survival than about power or dominance. The violence that did occur was often reactionary, a response to immediate threats rather than a strategic move to establish control or instill fear. The act of taking another's life was considered a grave action, not taken lightly. But as the socio-economic conditions worsened and the allure of power and money grew, so did the level of violence within these groups. The transition from fists and knives to guns didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, fueled by a combination of factors including the increasing availability of firearms, the escalating tensions between rival gangs, and the growing normalization of violence. Gang culture began to shift. The focus moved from protection and unity to dominance and power. The gun became a symbol of authority, a tool to command respect and instill fear. The more guns a gang had, the stronger it was perceived to be. And with this shift, the rate of gun violence began to rise. But as time went on, things began to change dramatically. The late 20th century marked a significant turning point in the history of gang violence. This era saw a dramatic surge in the use of firearms within gang culture. But why? What caused this shift? Let's delve in. As we entered the era of the late 20th century, a new wave of gang violence began to emerge. It was no longer about fistfights in back alleys or knife duels in the dead of night. The game had changed, and the new player was the firearm. Guns became a chilling symbol of power, a silent declaration of dominance, and a deadly tool for asserting control. There was a certain allure to these weapons that captivated the gang members. Their menacing presence brought an ominous sense of authority. They were not just tools for combat, they were badges of honor, tokens of prestige, and emblems of fear. A gang member with a gun was a force to be reckoned with, a figure of power to be feared and respected. But what factors led to this shift? One of the key contributors was the easy accessibility and availability of firearms. The black market was, and still is, teeming with all sorts of weapons, making it easy for anyone with the right connections and enough money to get their hands on a gun. Another factor was the escalating cycle of violence. As one gang started using firearms, others felt compelled to follow suit. It was an arms race, a dangerous game of one-upmanship that only served to fuel the fire of violence. The media also played a part, glorifying the gun-toting gangster image in movies and TV shows, making it seem cool and desirable. This romanticized portrayal made guns even more attractive to young, impressionable gang members. The late 20th century was indeed a turning point. The introduction of firearms into gang culture escalated the stakes, intensified the violence, and forever altered the landscape of gang-related conflicts. This was just the beginning of a disturbing trend. A trend that continues to cast a long, dark shadow over our society. Fast forward to today, and the situation has spiraled out of control. The current state of gun violence in gangs is chilling. It's not just a matter of bad apples anymore. It's a sprawling tree of violence that has put down roots in our communities. It's a tree that grows not from the ground but from the cracks in our society, fed by inequality, neglect, and desperation. It bears the bitter fruits of fear, division, and too often, loss. In the past, gang conflicts were often settled with fists or knives. Now the weapon of choice is invariably a firearm, and not just any firearm. We're talking about high-capacity, rapid-fire weapons that can wreak havoc in a matter of seconds. These are not tools of defense but instruments of annihilation. But let's not just talk in generalities, let's look at some statistics to underscore the severity of the problem. Every year more than 10,000 people in the United States lose their lives to gun violence. That's more than 27 people every day. And a disproportionate number of these deaths are linked to gang activity. In some cities, gang-related shootings account for up to 60% of all homicides. The impact on communities is devastating. Neighborhoods are transformed into war zones where the sounds of children playing are drowned out by the echoes of gunfire. Schools become fortresses, where learning takes a back seat to survival. Families live in a state of constant fear, their lives overshadowed by the looming threat of violence. And it's not just the physical toll that's alarming. The psychological impact is equally distressing. Children growing up in these conditions are often traumatized, their mental health severely compromised. They are forced to navigate a world that is far removed from the carefree innocence of childhood. This emotional burden can have long-lasting effects, leading to a cycle of violence that perpetuates across generations. Moreover, the shift in the types of firearms used has further escalated the situation. The use of handguns has given way to the prevalence of semi-automatic and automatic weapons. These weapons, designed for warfare, have found their way into the hands of teenagers and young adults who lack the maturity and judgment to handle such deadly force. Despite the grim reality, it's important to remember that these are not faceless statistics. These are our neighbors, our friends, our family members. Each number represents a life cut short, a future extinguished, a family shattered. The question remains, what can we do about this? While the situation is dire, all hope is not lost. As we navigate this complex issue, we must remember that there are potential solutions and strategies that can curb gun violence in gangs. These strategies are not just about fighting fire with fire but about preventing the fire from starting in the first place. Firstly, community initiatives play a vital role in this fight. By investing in youth programs, education, and social services, we can provide alternatives to gang membership. These initiatives can give young people the tools they need to build a future away from the streets. Providing mentorship programs, job training, after-school activities, and other forms of support can help to break the cycle of violence and create a safer environment for everyone. Next, we can't overlook the role of law enforcement. It's not just about cracking down on crime, but about building relationships with the communities they serve. This means working together with residents, local businesses, and community leaders to create a shared vision of safety. Through trust and collaboration, law enforcement can become a positive force of change. Lastly, policy changes at both the local and national level need to be considered. Reforms in gun control laws can make it harder for weapons to end up in the wrong hands. Initiatives like universal background checks, banning assault weapons, and closing the gun show loophole are just a few examples of how policy can play a part in reducing gun violence. But the most crucial part of these strategies is that they need to work together. Community initiatives, law enforcement strategies, and policy changes are all pieces of a larger puzzle. They need to be coordinated and implemented in tandem to create real, lasting change. And yes, it's a daunting task. The road ahead is long and filled with challenges, but remember, no problem is insurmountable when we work together. Each one of us has a role to play, and every small action can contribute to a larger solution. It's a daunting task, but together, we can make a difference. So, what have we learned about gun violence in today's gangs? We've journeyed from the early days, witnessing the evolution of this violent culture. We've dissected the present scenario, understanding the severe impacts it has on our communities. And we've explored potential solutions, highlighting the power of education and community intervention. This is a complex issue, woven into the fabric of our society, but not one beyond our reach. Remember, understanding the problem is the first step towards solving it.